Well, hello again everybody. Well, for some time I've been struggling to look at some of the LCDs on my voltmeters and various bits of test gear and really just complaining about my eyesight. And what it's actually brought to a head is that the lighting in my workshop here isn't very good. So what I've decided to do, and I'm afraid it isn't going to be pretty, I've gone ahead and I've just purchased a relatively cheap LED strip light. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to have a go at installing that and really see if it makes a difference, because hopefully it will. So just looking at the packaging, it does only appear to have only been slightly jumped on, so let's hope it's okay inside. So just giving it a read, this was actually made by a company called V-TAC, and they're actually telling us, I think it said on the packaging somewhere there, that apparently the LEDs are made by Samsung, so they're not cheap knockoff LEDs, they're actually made by Samsung, so this should be a high quality product. Apparently it's 6,000 lumens, I don't know whether that's good or bad, and it's 50 watts power. Now of course 50 watts doesn't sound very much when you compare that to an incandescent lamp, because certainly in a workroom I'd want more than a single 100-watt bulb, for example. But you know, the problem with incandescent lamps is most of the actual power just goes into heat. It's not actually useful light output, and of course LEDs are much more efficient. I'm not sure how much more efficient LEDs are than a filament lamp, but I'm sure it's several orders of magnitude, and you can tell that because they actually run pretty cool. So it's a 50-watt tube. It says that it's 6,000 lumens. I'm just looking if it's got the colour temperature on it. So the colour temperature of our light is 6,400 Kelvin, and that puts it towards the blue. It's kind of a cool white light, and I'm not saying that I particularly chose this lamp for any reason. The main reason that I bought it is because it has Samsung LEDs in it. I thought they would be good quality, and the other important thing was it was on Prime on next day delivery on Amazon. So that was a big thing, and that I wanted to install it this weekend and I didn't want to wait a week for it to arrive. Okay, let's take a look at it. Let's hope it hasn't been too badly jumped on. Okay, well it comes with a little bit of mains flex, and somehow I'm going to suspend this above me on a chain. I'm going to hang it from the beams in my room. It weighs nothing, so I guess that's a good thing. Well, as it turns out, 30 years later, my gran was in fact right. It did make me go blind. So you can see on the bench we've got a couple of Fluke meters set up, and although it probably looks quite bright in here on camera, I think that's actually just the brightness control on the camera adjusting itself. It's actually quite dark in here. Now we've got two Fluke meters, the one on the left, the Fluke 25. It's an older technology LCD, so I can barely read this. There's very little contrast in here between the black LCD digits and the background colour of the LCD. The more modern Fluke 175 is a lot better, but it's still not really very bright in here. So most of the light in my room comes from two pairs of wall lights. Now you can see one of those wall lights above my test equipment rack, and that consists of two LED bulbs. So if I just spin you around to the opposite corner, you can see that we've also got another pair of bulbs over there. Now unfortunately we've got two compact fluorescent lamps over there, but one of the bulbs has failed, so that isn't particularly good, is it? Now I think the main problem with these sidewall lights is a lot of the light does come sideways and some of it goes up. Only quite a small proportion actually is aimed down at the workbench where I need it. So just spinning you around a bit further, you can actually see that in the corner there we've got a window. It's quite a dull day today, and the window is actually very low down in the room. It's not a very big window, and because the walls here are so thick in this house, I think a lot of the light is really restricted getting in. So of course this is not very good in winter when the days are dull, and it's not very effective at night time. And a lot of the light from this window, it does really seem to fail to reach my bench. So most of the light for my close-up work comes from this angle poise lamp that's got a magnifier built into it. And again, this is another LED light, but the bulb in here is still relatively small, and it doesn't give off that much light. Well, I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear that there's a whole range of subjects which I know absolutely nothing about, and lighting is just one of them. So of course I did what everybody else does. I went onto the old interweb and did a Google search. Now, as it happens, lighting level in a building, it's measured in something apparently called Lux Level, and Lux has units per square metre, and the higher the number of lux, the higher the lux reading, the brighter it is. So a general requirement for an office space where people are milling around and, well, yeah, having meetings and stuff like that, you don't need super bright lighting, and the consensus is you need around 750 lux for an office space. Now, if you're working in a drawing workshop or something like doing drawings or artistic work or stuff like that, apparently you need a light level of around 1000 lux, and it came up without any prompting. Apparently if you're doing electronics work, as we are, you need one of the highest light levels. You need something between 1500 and 2000 lux, so that you can see what you're doing properly. Well, I've actually got no idea what the light level is in this room. I'm going to suspect it's going to be quite low. So I bought some equipment very cheaply on Amazon that hopefully should be able to give us an answer to that. Well, that's nice to see. Somebody's actually already opened the packaging for us, so that doesn't bode well, does it? So what we've got here is a digital lux meter made in China. Has it got a model number on it? Probably, but I can't see what it is. So let's open the pre-opened box. And good, that's another good sign that the battery in here has a, well, it's a new battery, but the case is open. The meter itself looks okay. I wonder where the sensor is. Is it under there? Okay, so the sensor has a little cover over it. Of course, we're not going to bother reading instructions or anything else. This is quite a nasty looking battery, isn't it? It's a Paco brand battery. Super heavy duty battery. Do we believe that? Do we hell? But in fairness, it can't actually be worse than a Duracell battery, can it, when it comes to puking its guts out everywhere. Now, of course, if you're wondering why I decided to buy this particular light level meter, it was for the simple reason that it was absolutely the very cheapest one that I could find. And I think these are about £6 on Amazon. Well, I've got to admit, it does feel reassuringly solid. First impressions, it doesn't look too bad. Is there a model number on it? Well, it says Lux meter. Well, we are kind of lacking a model number. Is there anything on this piece of paper? Well, I despise instructions. Okay, so we switch it on and immediately it does something. So I can see here, as we've just switched it on, it's gone into some auto ranging mode, and the level it's coming up with at the moment is 339 lux. Let me put it down properly. Well, in fact, now I've actually angled it down, that light level has fallen even further. It's actually saying, well, it's floating around, maybe I'll need to just get out of the way, around 272. So I brought you in for a close-up, and the actual lux level reading, it is wandering around a little bit, and I suspect that's because as I move around I'm maybe blocking a little bit of light from the window, but that reading is coming up as 282 at the moment, so that really does look quite low. So just taking out my crib sheet again, remember that the office space requires a lighting level of 750 lux, a drawing office requires a light output of 1000 lux, and for an electronics workshop we need a lux level between 1500 and 2000. Well, according to this little meter, our lighting level here is 280, so it's actually only about a third of what we require for an office space. And let me just turn off my overhead light, the angle poise lamp. And so the room lighting in here, the sidewall lights are just generating 163 lux. So in fairness, I didn't really realise quite how bad the lighting was in here until we had to go at measuring it. Well, it's August in the UK at the moment and it's coming to the end of summer, and it's about 2:30 on a Saturday afternoon, so it's reasonably bright outside. It is full daylight. What I think we'll do is we'll just turn off the workshop lighting on the side walls, so we'll just get light coming in now through that side window, and we'll see what it drops to. Well, it actually drops so dark in here that we can't actually read the meter. Does that say 45? Let's take a quick look at the window. Well, it's probably difficult to tell looking through the camera, but it's really gone very dark in here now. In fact, I think the light meter's dropped even further. I think that's showing a reading of around 33. So yeah, it's effectively black in here at the moment. So the light coming in from my window is really very poor. It's not good for anything. And with the sidewall lights come on again, it's the light levels come back up to 138. Well, as if by magic, here's one that I prepared earlier. So this light in Batten, I think it's around 5 feet long, and I've just got it suspended from some chains from the ceiling there. It doesn't have to be chains because the thing weighs absolutely nothing. That's just what I happen to have to hand. So let's plug it in and, well, hopefully things are going to get a lot brighter. Now again, I'm not exactly sure how much will come through on the camera because it does adjust to the brightness in the room, but for me that's made really quite a miraculous difference. It's actually much brighter, and I think it will be a huge improvement for my workbench here. But interestingly enough, the lighting figure, it's actually still only well, it's 800 now. So remember that the Lux level for an office space was 750. So we're actually above that. We're above the lighting requirement for an office space. But the actual lighting requirement for a drawing office comes up at around 1,000. Well, we're 200 lux off that. And if you remember, the electronics workshop was coming up with a light level between 1,500 and 2,000. So to actually get that up to 1,500, we've still got some way to go. Let me turn on the overhead angle poise lamp because I've got that switched off at the moment. So let's provide a little bit more local lighting. So with my angle poise desk lamp switched on, you can see we're actually approaching a lux level of somewhere near to 1,000 now, and that seems like amply bright enough for me. Now you've got to remember that these stated lux levels are actually developed for people in industry, so they are what you would call government guidelines. But even though these are government guidelines, there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't follow those standards in our home workshops here. So I actually think that maybe you should check the lighting in your workshop, see if it's adequate, because it's much easier and it's more pleasant to work in a workplace that is brightly and adequately lit. There's no point, I guess, in struggling. I'm surprised how long I've actually been struggling in here with a very poor light level, even though I use occasionally photography lamps and stuff like that. So maybe go and check your lighting. These light level meters, they're only a few pounds on eBay, as I say, or Amazon. I think this is about £6, and trying to make sure that your lighting is adequate for the work that you're doing. So this new overhead light that I've just installed, it's actually plugged into this extension lead here, which runs my rack of test gear, but it's actually quite difficult to lean over the bench and plug this and unplug it. And of course, because it is such a bright work light, I may not want it on all the time, so leaning over here and plugging and unplugging this is actually going to prove quite tedious. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and I bought this programmable remote control switch, and I think this is a free pack, so you get a little remote control unit, and I'm hoping you get 1-2 free plugs with it. Now again, this is another purchase which I made via Amazon. I'm not affiliated with them. It's just far easier to buy things on Amazon than it is to actually go shopping to the shops these days, isn't it? Especially when some of us are still in lockdown or shielding. So I bought this on Amazon. I think off the top of my head these are about £12, and I thought what we could do is, rather than me constantly having to reach over to switch these overhead lights on, I have got a few separate lights in here. I thought that we could plug all those lights onto these remote control outlets and well, control them that way. So just looking for the, is there a model number on here? Yes, I'm guessing it's this one here, so it's a UHRS 103A. Manufacturer's name, Wills, yeah, I think it is. I suppose it's probably manufactured in China. Let's go ahead and unbox it and see what it comes with. So it does indeed appear to come with 3 plugs, like a trio of shagging frogs, aren't they? And one of them's got a condom on the end, so let's go ahead and remove that. Now apparently these are actually 13 amps each, so you know, that's a much bigger capacity than we actually need for our light. These actually do seem a little bit grubby, they seem a little bit dirty. Yeah, I think they are new, I don't think they've been unwrapped before. Let's have a look at the remote control unit that comes with it. And as far as I can tell, this remote control unit is an RF remote control. In fact, yeah, it's in the license-free band there, which is 433 megahertz. So the remote control unit has got a little battery in it, and the battery has got one of these little tabs on it, so the battery doesn't drain. So we just pull the tab out, put the battery back in, put the cover back on. He said there's a piece of plastic splinters apart, and if I press this, oh yeah, we get a little pleasing red light to tell us when the fingers come on. So these plug sockets have some numbers on them. So going from left to right, we've got 307-1, 307-2 and 307-3. Now it is possible to buy sets of these plugs, and we've actually got, well actually no, this is just a free unit, but I'm guessing there is ways of expanding this set, because I think you can buy bigger remote controls. So just taking a little look at the controller, on the left hand side it looks like we've got a row of on buttons 1 to 3, and we've got a row of off buttons 1 to 3. So I think I'll take our plug number 1, we'll plug that in and switch on, and I'm hoping that all I've got to do is press the on button, and we get a little red light appearing on there, so that's giving some proof of life. So that's on, off, on, off. Well, got nothing to complain about there, that's quite nice, isn't it? So we can definitely hear a relay clicking inside, so I think a relay is probably going to be more reliable than a triac or some solid state relay, so that's quite reassuring. And I say, it does claim to have a 13 amp capacity, so that's certainly good, isn't it? You know, that's bigger than anything we can really plug into it here. So I guess we can plug all 3 of these in together and then switch them on and off in sequence. So if we get the sequence right, there's 1, 2 and 3. So all those work, and of course I'm guessing if we switch number 1 off, all my plugs are going to go off. Okay, and they don't have a memory, so if these have a power failure, this equipment defaults to turning itself off, which I would class as being a safety feature, because certainly you wouldn't want the risk of one of these turning themselves on, depending on what you've got plugged into them, of course. I have to shuffle some of my equipment around a little bit just to get it in. So in theory we should be able to switch our light on by the wonders of remote control. Here we go. Oh, wrong one. Oops. So we should now be able to switch my overhead light on by the wonders of remote control. And in theory we should be able to be quite annoying and switch it on and off very rapidly, so let's try that as well. Now for any of you tree huggers out there that may be tuned in today, we've gone ahead and we've plugged in our little remote control switch into our energy monitoring plug, and according to the plug here it's actually drawing between, well sometimes it flicks between 0.00 and 0.01, so it's drawing, I don't know, about 0.01 of a watt. It may draw a little bit more when we actually switch the relay coil on inside here. Let's try that. Well, it kind of steadies at 0.01 of a watt, so it's really not drawing very much. And what I think we might do is we'll leave this one plugged in for half an hour, and we'll see if it gets warm to the touch at all. So I suspect our little transmitter here is a relatively simple device, and I would have thought it isn't doing two-way communications. It's probably just transmitting some form of code to the plugs. So what frequency? It says it's 433.92, so 433.920, and if we try transmitting. So as you can clearly see, our little handheld scanner here, it's picking up the communication from the remote control to the plugs. Well, as you can see, I've gone ahead and I've actually switched on the spectrum analyzer, and you can see that we've got a signal bouncing up and down in the middle there. And I've actually just noticed a couple of things. You can see that the signal is bouncing up and down, it's not constantly transmitting. Well, the reason it's doing that, there's actually two reasons behind it. One is because of the way which the spectrum analyzer sweeps. That's one of the reasons it appears to be going on and off, but the main reason that it appears to be going on and off, it's simply because the way that these license-free radios operate, they actually have to have gaps in the transmission, which I'm guessing is to let any other device have a go at talking, and that's one of the ways they actually limit the power which is being pumped into the RF spectrum. They have to have gaps, so as you can see, it's not constantly transmitting, it's doing little bursts of transmission and then turning off again. Now the other thing I've noticed, if I actually hold my finger onto the button here, you can actually see that it is repeatedly pulsing, but it's actually stopped pulsing now. So if you actually, I don't know, accidentally keep one of the buttons held, this thing doesn't just keep transmitting, which would eventually wear down the batteries in the handset. It seems to transmit for about 5 or 10 seconds and then it stops again. So you can see on the bench here's a little small receiving loop that we were using to pick up the RF signal from our remote control device. Here's our remote control, so if I actually just press the button here, what you'll see is you get a little light here to confirm it's transmitting, and let's just see how long it does transmit for. I think it's about 5 seconds, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, 6 seconds, about 6 seconds. So this thing isn't going to go flat if you accidentally leave one of the buttons pressed, it will switch off. So that's a nice feature. Now, of course, for many types of broadcasting, an actual radio license is required. So all the radio stations you listen to and TV stations, they actually have to apply to their relevant authorities to be allowed to broadcast. And such is true of people like radio amateurs who have to have a license before they can transmit. But there is certain equipment, in fact like this one here, which comes under what they call the license free. So provided that this equipment is tested and it meets the required standards, you're actually allowed to operate these very low powered transmitters without applying for any type of license, which is, you know, is not the case for other equipment. As I say, television, radio amateurs, and I think even things like taxi equipment, they all have to have radio licenses, but this little transmitter doesn't. So I'm just looking up the details of this one, and of course I should have remembered 433 megahertz. That's used quite typically for things like data links. I've had a few of these little weather stations in the past. Typically they use a 433 megahertz band as well. So I'm just looking for what are the conditions of use for this 433 band. So here we are, section 3.5.1, 433 megahertz. The 433 megahertz band was for many years the principal license exec band for short-range devices. So this is classed as a short-range device because it's not very powerful. The band is widely used by a variety of applications at a radiated power of up to 10 milliwatts ERP, so that's effective radiated power, and with a 10% duty cycle. So as I said, when we were looking at the spectrum analyzer earlier, we could see some gaps in the when this thing was transmitting, and that's because they allow a maximum duty cycle of 10%. So this thing can't transmit constantly. Well, at the moment I've taken my little handheld scanner and I've actually tuned it into 433 megahertz, and I'm simply feeding the audio output that would normally go to the speaker. We're actually feeding that into channel 1 of the oscilloscope, and the oscilloscope is just set up to produce a very, very slow sweep. Well, every now and again you can see that the oscilloscope displays a little packet of data. Let's just wait a minute. Okay, there's one there on the right hand side. Just disappeared again. Oh, and there's a better one. Well, I suspect what that is, I've got a weather station on the garage outside the house, and I think what that is, that's a communication between the external weather station, which is on my garage roof, and its base unit, which is in my kitchen downstairs. But it's also quite likely that my neighbours have got similar devices. Maybe they've got I don't know, these radio doorbells. They quite often operate on 433 megahertz. So at the moment we're not actually turning on my plug socket, we're not even touching it, so you can see that there's actually quite a lot happening in the 433 megahertz band, because there's lots of these little devices all talking together around the home as we speak. Oh, there's another one. So what we'll do is we'll just operate my plug and we'll just stop the sweep. Well, as you can see, I've just gone ahead and I've just frozen the display on our oscilloscope, and you can see it's actually picked up 2 data packets here, which both of these have come from our little remote control switch. So let's just zoom into one of those packets. These data packets do look to be identical to each other. Now, as I say, I can't decode this. I don't really know enough about the data format or how it's being transmitted. Quite often these devices use something like frequency shift keying, and unfortunately the way that I'm actually pulling this out of the audio from the radio also generally hides a lot of the data. You need to really pull it off at the detector stage. So okay, well, that was interesting. So we can actually see that when we press a button on our little handset here, it does transmit these data packets, and they do look to be identical, each of them. And finally, let's just go back to our plug socket. Well, it feels completely cool. It's at ambient temperature, so it really is using very, very little power. Well, I've got to admit, I'm actually quite impressed with these little radio controlled sockets. Of course, in the past I've also had some of these sockets which are controlled via the Wi-Fi network, and you can use your Alexa or your smartphone to turn them on and off. But to be quite honest, I've always found that kind of thing just more trouble than it's worth. So I'm really quite happy with them. They seem to be well made. How long they will last in the future, who knows? But right now, I'm going to give them a thumbs up. Well, as always, thanks very much for watching today, but until next time, I think that'll do. Bye bye. Blackness, doom, all dark, black, black, blackness, doom. We're still there.